one thing before even starting with the process, I think I've learned now going through two really big identity shifts is like, who are you now and who will you be after the acquisition?
All right, welcome to another episode of Lessons via Leaders, the podcast where we dive deep into the world of entrepreneurship and hear from the leaders who have lived it. We're not here to sugarcoat anything. We want to hear the raw and real stories of success, failure, and everything in between. Join us as we talk to some of the best and brightest founders, uncover their secrets to success, and share their lessons learned with you all. So sit back, grab a cup of coffee, tea, cafecito, or whatever beverage you enjoy, and get ready to learn from some of the best. Lessons via Leaders is brought to you by the Local Leaders Collective, an organization that helps founders and entrepreneurs take their business and personal lives to the next level through peer support. If you're interested in joining the LLC or learning more, check out the website at www.thelocalleaders.com. All right, with all that being said, let's get right into the episode.
All right. Excited for this. Juha, thank you for being here. This is just a cool moment because, for those of you that were listening to Lessons via Leaders before, all 100 of you that were tuning into the podcast, appreciate the support, but excited because we're kicking this podcast back up. And now even better than ever because Elizabeth, COO of Local Leaders Collective, is joining us as a co-host. And I'm really excited to have you on the show and really take it to the next level here. So.
Yeah, it's pretty cool to be here, to be doing a podcast again, but now to be doing it with you. So it's exciting.
And so many cool things that you're working on for the Local Leaders Collective and just all the initiatives with that organization. And we can get into the Juha. You're also a member of Local Leaders Collective. Actually, Juha, you played an instrumental part in helping this organization form, introducing me to Adam and Oz and that whole thing. So forever indebted, for that, man. But would love to just obviously focus on you today because thank you for being here. And you have the esteemed honor of being the only repeat guest Lessons via Leaders because you were, I think, the second or the third guest on the show, right?
Totally.
You and Joe together.
It's awesome to be back.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me. And Local Leaders Collective is such an amazing organization. I love that you started with that story. I mean, when you had the vision for all of this and originally connected with Adam and Oz and just seeing that original starting point and seeing where it is today with Elizabeth joining and the energy in the organization now, the membership, the people who are part of it, how much this means to people, how much it's helping people. It's so special. You guys can be really, really proud of what you've built. And it's just an honor for me to be a part of it. And I started as a moderator that was supposed to hop in for 3 meetings. And after the first one, I think I called Will. I'm like, can I just stay? I want to stay. And who cares if I already have an EO for him? I need to do this. And I'm really happy. Our group is amazing. The organization's amazing. And I think it's just getting started. So thanks for having me here.
Of course. Happy to hear that. And I know you've been stoked on all the things that are happening with the organization.
Yeah, I know.
Right?
I mean, it's an incredible community. I just say every day, it's not really work. It's just like pleasure to just get to talk to all these incredible people with just amazing backgrounds, and everyone's got that same mindset. And I think that just goes a long way. But I'd like to hear a little bit about your background, and I know that you're more than one forum, so I find that very interesting. So take us back a little bit. Take us to the journey here to where you are today.
Sure. I mean, before I knew what a forum was, that's for sure. Now a bit of a forum junkie because of all the benefits it brings. But I mean, I'm originally from Finland, so I'm an immigrant entrepreneur. I had a chance to grow up in Florida, so I was here from kindergarten to 4th grade with my family up in the Palm Beach area, and I just fell in love with what Florida is. I love the natural beauty of the place. I love the energy. I actually love how new everything is here. Everything's like reinventing itself all the time. Like it doesn't matter what things were in the past. It's just about what is this place going to be in the future, and that really appeals to me. Kind of the opposite of Europe where everything's really old and classic, and that's got its own vibes, but it's not for me. I like things that are rejuvenating, inventing themselves again, and kind of pushing forward. So being a kid growing up here, I always wanted to come back. It just took a really, really long time, and I ended up coming through Canada first, where I started my first company, which was a sporting goods import business around a sport called floorball, which I grew up playing and loving in Finland. Pro game in 4 countries, believe it or not, and Olympic recognized, and nobody knew it in North America. So I thought I have a choice. I could either learn a new sport or I could teach everybody the one sport I'm kind of good at. And I thought this is easier. I'm just going to teach everybody this game. And got a minivan and a small warehouse, which was originally my condo in college, and drove around Canada multiple times, went to every small town you can imagine, tried to get retailers to buy the product, got schools playing. That was our kind of growth hack, was like, teach the little kids and they're going to love this game and get into it. And by the end, we had a tournament of over 1,000 players that was televised in Maple Leaf Gardens, one of the most iconic hockey buildings ever. We had Hockey Canada, USA Hockey selling the equipment in partnership with us. And it was a great journey, but it didn't make money. It was like one of those passion projects where I put in so much time because I loved it, but I'm like, I need to get on with my life. You know, what's going to be next? Like, you know, I've learned a lot of lessons, and I can maybe go into some of those more. But I love the technology side. We were really early on e-com, and we had a store that serviced all these little pockets of players we had found all across North America. I thought maybe the calling for me is technology, and I had my first Mac. I think I begged my dad to buy it for me 1993 or 1994.
Which Mac was it? Was it the white one or the multicolored one?
It had a 16 megahertz
Oh, nice.
process.
Like a desktop Mac.
It was a desktop.
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
a Mac LC.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember, maybe 4 megs of RAM.
You play some Oregon Trail on that one?
Oh, dude, it killed it. Yeah. And you could put on the 256 color option.
That's right.
And I remember, like, when we got it, it was in black and white mode.
Yep.
And I thought it was defective. I'm like, I thought it was supposed to have a color screen. And there's nobody you could call. Nobody knew Apple products in Finland. So it took me like a month to figure out there was a setting that I could change and see color. I'm like, this is crazy, you know? And just had always been passionate about it. And for me, it was like, okay, if I'm going to go into a career shift, I need to like learn about it. And I ended up going to a code school in Toronto called Bitmaker Labs to learn to code. I was like, maybe I'm going to build a product for myself or something for my existing business. And that's what opened my eyes to what ended up becoming the second chapter of my career. And that was co-founding Wyncode with my wife, Jo. And just seeing the effect that education had on people was really inspirational. I was like, if we could open this somewhere where the ecosystem doesn't even exist for tech, we could help build something really, really cool. And Miami was our place to do that. I think we thought long and hard about it. It was maybe the riskiest, but the one with the most upside. And a lot of the original kind of OGs, you will being a huge part of that and supporting us at the beginning, like made it possible to do that. And look back now, 1,000 graduates later and being acquired by BrainStation, which I think is now the global #1 in our space. Really cool journey. A lot of twists and turns along the way. And now reinventing myself again in the data game and trying to build a data analytics and monetization platform called Usko.
That's awesome. And yeah, I can attest to just how big of an impact you did have in the Miami tech scene. Like, we would hire multiple people when we were running Live Ninja just around the corner from here in Wynwood. We would constantly hire Wyncode graduates, people that literally had no coding experience whatsoever, learned how to code in Wyncode, and all of a sudden they were making 2 or 3x what they were making outside of the tech industry in companies like Live Ninja and others. And I remember Emilio would always tell me, he'd be like, bro, this junior coder that just came out of Wyncode is like taking the seniors to school on some of these code pull requests and things like that. So hats off to you, brother. You really did have an impact, in the scene.
I love that. I mean, one huge that you guys hired and supported because it takes vision. Now it's becoming more common to hire people if they don't have the educational background, but 2014, people thought that was crazy. Like, wait, this person doesn't have a computer science degree? Like, how's this possible? And it just shows if you put your mind to it, you work hard, and you're willing to outwork the people ahead of you in line, you can make it in anything. And I think that was cool. And the stories of some of the people you hired who've gone on to build businesses and, people who have great careers and people who've retired their parents and their grandparents. Like, it's amazing to have been part of a business that did well, but did good, and it was the people who were in that business who did the good, but it's just really great to hear those stories.
Yeah, man, for sure. So tell us a little bit really quickly about Usko, because I remember having so many like lunches with you, as you were kind of transitioning and you're like, I have this idea. I'm so passionate about data and like what to do with it. So tell us about like the inspiration for Usko and what it is really now today.
Yeah, I mean, I think like the big vision around it is interesting, but the problem really is like, the biggest selling product in the world right now is us, and it's our data. Like, it powers everything. And, when I look at my bank account, I'm not getting a share of that. I don't know about you guys, but that was really the part. Not. Yeah, I don't think so.
We are the product.
We are the product, and I think there's a funny cartoon I found about this that I'm going to use in a pitch deck, which is like these pigs, it's kind of sad, in a slaughterhouse, but they're like, man, we don't have to pay anything to stay here, and the food is free too, you know? And it's like, yeah, it's great until it's not, right? And I think we're starting to see with data when it's not okay, you know, and we're just giving up this asset. And that to me is very motivational, is to try to see, can we balance that and find a way for people to get some of that upside that I think we deserve. And there's a lot of things happening in this space. You have data privacy laws are getting stronger. You see what's happening in California and Europe already. And you have things like the tech companies that can benefit from being more focused on security and privacy, like Apple, when they put that, hey, can we track your location in every single app? 96% of people said no. You know, so it just shows, if people say, oh, no one cares about security or privacy of your data, if you give them the choice, they actually do.
In plain English.
In plain English,
exactly.
and they understand what it is. And that one change cost Facebook $20 billion that quarter, right? So it just shows people do care about this, but the big tech companies have no incentive to try to change it, except Apple maybe, because they're less reliant on it, so they can use it as a positive. And then you've had this whole kind of Web3 movement, which is all about ownership. And really, I think that's also just shows people are more interested in this. So I think a lot of things will happen in the space, and it's just it's a fun thing to be working on.
It's really interesting because, like, you've ran another business, it got acquired. Both you and your wife have full-time roles. You're doing the founder journey again. How do you keep doing it again and continue to be inspired and almost unafraid of what that outcome is going to be? Because that's what I think is super impressive of both of you, is that grit. Like, you come into Miami, it wasn't what it was back then when you guys were doing Wyncode. It's not what it, it's not what it is now, I mean. So obviously you saw the vision for it. Where does that mindset come from?
It's a great question. So first of all, I am afraid. I think that's part of what drives me, is like the fear of failure, right? But I do think that there is an important piece to vision, and there's definitely a vision of Miami becoming like every other city was becoming, and some of these cities were ahead, like Toronto was a little bit ahead. Like, you didn't have Shopify yet, that started in Ottawa, but like you did have tech companies starting to get traction. You had schools like Bitmaker that I went to that were teaching, people were getting jobs. You could see that sort of tech ecosystem, but I think there's also this kind of convergence of the type of communities that tech people wanted to be in. And we really felt that in Wynwood. Like, that was, I can't say how important the neighborhood was for us to make that choice.
You put it in the name.
So we important. Did. Yeah, and it just felt like home. The saying, we're like, this place will help Miami become what Miami should be, which is like, why can't it be all the things Miami's known for? So the beaches, the partying, the beautiful weather, all of that's great, like the tourism aspect. But like, people want this in their lives, for a part, but you want a lot more than that if you're going to live here and be happy. Right. And I think the city was filled with ambitious people who were really, really willing to work hard, but that education and the direction they needed was missing. So I think that gave us confidence in being like, this could really work. And you talk about vision, and I think one of the things that helped was having this sort of roadmap where we were like, we want to have our own campus. Like, that always was like, we started at the Lab Miami, the first co-working space. Like, huge kudos to the lab team for building what they did and giving us a launching off point. But the idea was always our own place, and that really drove us. The funny thing for me is, like, once we got there, I felt like I was lacking that next step of the vision. I'm like, oh, we made it, but what now? And maybe for some people it was 20 locations around the world. It wasn't that for me, because at that time we had a young family, and the reason I moved to Miami was to be here. I don't want to leave ever, right? So it was, I guess my vision kind of ended there. It got us to a certain point, but I could see, the importance of, if the dream had been 100 locations around the world, maybe I'd still be doing that, and pushing forward.
It's super impressive looking back on Wyncode and the success that it became. To take any company, to start a company, and then scale it and then sell it is a huge feat, right? And what you did is, I think, even more impressive on top of that, is you changed so many lives in the process. But through the M&A process, and I think also in the spirit of this show, which is all about sharing lessons learned, maybe there's some lessons that you can give listeners on selling a company, right? Like, when it became time to sell, especially something you were so passionate about, like Wyncode, that doesn't feel like something, this is opportunistic, there's a hole in the market. This was more like mission oriented and mission driven. So maybe some lessons learned now looking back at the acquisition process, and like things you wish you would have known when you started that.
I mean, honestly, there's so much. One, one, I love selling. So like
Yeah.
whether I'm selling a seat at Wyncode or selling the whole
Right.
company, like I just love doing it, right? I love the relationship. I love the validation of if somebody's interested in
Right.
something you've built.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, like to me, the only way that I factor that something's worth it if someone's willing to pay you money for it.
Mm-hmm.
If they're not, they can tell you everything. Oh, it's amazing. I love what you're doing, but they're not giving you $1. It's not worth $1, right? So I think that was something that always drove me as like, hey, if I can kind of prove that this is worth something. But I think one thing before even starting with the process, I think I've learned now going through 2 really big identity shifts is like, who are you now and who will you be after the acquisition, you know, and for you with Live Ninja, I'm sure it's very similar. I mean, you were so community oriented. You guys did Waffle Wednesdays, like you were a mainstay of the community, right? And for me, it was floorball. I was Mr. Floorball. That's what people called me. It's all I did. I would dedicated my life to it, you know, and all of a sudden one day I'm just gone, you know, and I was like, it was too much, you know, like I needed to push myself into the next level. And I was fortunate to sell that company. I think there's always a way that you can exit out of something if you've built value. Like people will recognize the value and you can do it. And I think with Wyncode, it was even more extreme identity shift, and I think I'm still dealing with it because here I am talking about Wyncode, right? So it's like you know,
Still you.
It's still me. It's part of me, and I think I'm accepting that that's okay. I'm also someone who I'm hard on myself, so I'm like, oh, I should really be like, why isn't my new thing further along? Why are people still talking about the old thing, right? And it's like very fortunate that people even want to talk to me, right? So I think that's the most important
That's such an
thing.
interesting takeaway, like to think. When we do this to ourselves, we're like, who am I now if I'm not doing this right now? But really, the past achievements are still who you are. Like, you still are Wyncode, even though you're not doing it. But to ourselves, we tell ourselves, well, I'm not doing it anymore. Who am I?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But you still, all your achievements are still very much alive and will always be alive. Like, the folks that you change the trajectory of their careers and lives will always think of you and Joe as these game changers for them, you know, and that will never go away. So
Appreciate that.
Yeah, that's a great takeaway.
I mean, and it was such a big part of the identity of you're here in Miami, and now you're here doing a podcast in a studio right by Wyncode.
Yeah,
right?
right.
I mean,
Yeah.
so
You manifested
of
all
course,
this.
Yeah.
You know?
Of course, we're having a conversation about that, and I think that you're part of this growth. And so it's really hard to detach you from it, which I think is still rewarding, right? So we want to see where you're going to continue to go, but it's beautiful to hear you talk about that backstory.
Thanks. Yeah, no, it's really cool. And I think just in terms of like some maybe more tactical things about like selling a business, you know, like we were not planning to do it, but I think that part of it is like reading the market and understanding what's going on. So there was something that were helping us at the time, which was COVID. We ended up having to go online, something we really did not believe in. There were a lot of code schools that taught online and had really poor results. And we had to make the switch in 3 days. So our team hustled. They did amazing to basically replicate the in-person experience over Zoom, you know, and just having that crazy high touch. And all of a sudden we realized we could have students from anywhere, and people knew us who had been planning to move to Miami just to do this, and now they could sign up really easily. So we're up 20% all of a sudden, more than the capacity of our room could have been, right? So you're like, oh, geez, this is probably a good time because this is not going to last. Eventually, you're going to have to go back into in-person. The other thing was the space was getting more and more competitive. So there were a few kind of things that maybe drove me, and one was looking at like kind of like Miami success stories. Like one was like Hugo Fresh, right? Like what an amazing company, right? Like part of the Miami fabric.
Yep.
In Wynwood, I loved going there.
Yeah.
It was
right
my
there
spot.
in the walls, right?
Right there in the walls. And one day I go and the door is locked.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm like, what happened, right? And it's like, it's done. We couldn't cut it. Too much competition. And I remember talking to them, and it was all about the big brands coming from outside, and they did nothing different. They still had an amazing product. They were doing it right, but people had more marketing money and more product they could just throw at the Miami market to crush them. And I'm like, I do not want to be that company. You know, like we need to find a way, like it's not enough to be a good story. We need to have a good ending also. And so I felt like this is a good time to do it. And at the time we were dealing with a lot of crazy things. One thing with our immigration and visa situation where technically I wasn't even able to work for the company for a certain amount of time. And I was like, well, I'm still an owner of the business. What can I do without upsetting immigration or whatever it is? I thought I'm allowed to sell the business. So let me see what the market looks like. And some people use business brokers, whatever. I'm like, I should be able to do this way better than someone else. And we ended up having 3 offers for the business after I started going to market and talking to people. And at that point, it was just, and that would be a big piece of advice, I would say, if you're ever selling anything, multiple offers.
Yeah,
It's
for
all
sure.
about BATNA, best alternative to negotiated agreement. That's the only way you can get what you want, is if you have multiple people you can talk
For sure.
to.
You get some
Yeah.
leverage. So you
Yeah.
really initiated the momentum into selling. It wasn't something that kind of came out of the blue. You were like, you know what, let's feel the market out and really kind of see what's there.
And I could feel it happening.
Right.
You know, like you as long as you're in talking to people that are in your industry
Yeah.
and you're doing the right things and people respect you inside the industry as well, things will happen. And it's crazy. Like at the end of the day, BrainStation was the clear favorite for us because of their reputation and the way they focused on quality. And it was just about making sure that the offer was also one where we felt comfortable, and having multiple to talk to helped us make sure that it could kind of tick all the boxes, which was really great.
That's awesome. And that's actually another really great takeaway, because there's an old adage in like entrepreneurship that companies are not sold, they're bought. So like meaning that it usually when you want to sell a company, it's an inbound interest. It's not like, hey, do you want to buy my company? Do you want to sell? So like typically entrepreneurs are taught in startup school that like you really have to position yourself where you're kind of too great to ignore, basically, and then people are coming to buy you. But if you put yourself out to sell the company, typically it doesn't work. But you're showing that there's kind of a middle ground there. Like if you're interested in moving, like there are signals you could send out to the market that could facilitate and kind of have a little bit of a blend of both. It's not like you're like actively trying to sell, but you're like open to offers and open to seeing what's out there.
Totally. And I would say going too aggressive is not going to work.
Right.
Yeah. I've also had that experience recently with something else that I worked on where I could see a path for this portion of a project I was on to be acquired. Made total sense. But because we were completely reaching out, it didn't end up working, you know? So I think you have to have sort of a balance between them, and you have to have a buyer that's legit and serious, and you have to really gauge and kind of figure out what parts of each offer are good and how you can make it be a package that works. But I think that it's definitely a really exciting thing to go through. And, you know, from an entrepreneur point of view, like you just have to be ready for what happens next, because I think a lot of people don't think about that. And it's definitely a big part. It was definitely a huge part of my identity. And I've talked to a lot of entrepreneurs that deal with what do I do now? Who am I? Like, am I happy just chilling, or do I need to create something new to feel that I'm building again, right?
I love to talk about what happens next, because I think Will and I have had this conversation a couple times. And when I was joining LLC, that was like my biggest question, like how did this all really get started? And it was because of that part, right? Like what's going to happen next? And that's when you needed the most support.
Right.
So, you know, in that phase that you're selling, you know, it's happening. What's like the first thing that comes to mind? Like, do I need to think of something immediately? Are you going to enjoy the time off? Do you find a peer group? Are you already in a peer group to support you? Like, what was that journey into joining, you know, you're a part of, is it EO?
EO and LLC. Yeah.
So were you already a part of them before you joined or before you were selling? Or is this something you're like, I need to be in some sort of peer group?
So EO, maybe it's 6-7 years. So I was already part of that. I think LLC was after, but pretty close afterwards. So I think from that perspective, I kind of had both groups supporting me, which was really cool. And since then, in my LLC group, someone else has sold a business also. And in my EO group, I'm trying to think. Yeah, we had one person who had sold. So I think just being able to tap into those experiences is really, really cool. But I think a lot of it is like, for me at least, is like being kind to myself. And I really struggle with that. I don't know if it's cultural or the way that I was brought up, or part of the thing that drives me is like, you know, not being kind and being like, I got to work harder, I got to do more. But I think in that stage, especially afterwards, like to be okay with like not accomplishing a lot, you know, and there was a time when I didn't really know what I was doing. I got to spend more time with the kids, which was really special. It was also a weird time because it was still COVID. We ended up like selling our house. We moved to Palm Beach for a while, staying in my parents' condo. And I'm like, what happened? It's like, we sold a business.
You're retired.
I'm living with my mom, you know, and it's like, I don't know anybody up here, you know, I'm like, what happened to our lives? You know, it's really weird. And then I'm like, you know, what do I love? I'm like, oh, I love real estate. Maybe I'll do my realtor license. And it took me like a year to get it done because I couldn't move. I was just so, in some ways, had been in this like, you know, grind for so long that I didn't really know how to like get going again, you know. And I think to a certain point, I'm still struggling with that a little bit, to be like, how do I really turn that page and like fully go for something? I think that there's moments when I'm 100% engaged. There's other moments where it's like I always joke, like when I started the floorball business, it was like, 2001 or 2002. That's when I burnt out, and I've just kept going, so I'm like,
Wow.
and that's not exactly true, but I felt this just, there hasn't been a change in pace really, and maybe eventually I've gotten better at dealing with it. I have more support and I have ways to be kind to myself and take a break, but I think it's hard. And US entrepreneurship culture is very much about, oh, I'm up at 4 a.m. doing stuff and, trying to push like crazy, and I'm building 2 businesses at the same time. And I just raised 50 for this one and 100 over here, and posting on LinkedIn, and I'm building a persona, and my brand is this, and it can be pretty overwhelming, especially when you get out of that all of a sudden. And I got off of all social media. I stopped everything because it just didn't make me feel good. Like, this is just, it's too much.
Yeah,
I don't know who
hustle
I am.
and mind, hustle and grind mentality gets you, and it takes a grip on you, and then sometimes you're like,
does.
it just break from all of it.
Yeah. And I've tried, I think still LinkedIn a little bit, but almost everything else, I'm just like, it's not bringing me value.
Right.
Yeah.
I feel like I hear that more and more these days. Like people are now focusing more on like LinkedIn, and more people are leaving like Instagram just because we focus so much on like talking about the positives, and and you get into conversations with friends like, oh, look at everything I did. I just sold this. I just sold that. And it's like, great.
Yeah. Are you happy?
Yeah. That's the question.
Yeah.
Are you?
Yeah.
I think another great thing to hit on, and something folks can learn from you, is how to do all this with a spouse, right? Because I've always admired you and Joe, first of all, to be married and also to be business partners, co-founders in something together, and do it as successfully as you guys did. I mean, that's incredibly impressive. And then just I think a lot of folks could learn a lot from the way you guys manage, not just operating a business. You guys did it together, but now you're doing 2 separate businesses, because she's still with BrainStation. You're an entrepreneur and a startup founder again, and you have 2 amazing kids, right? How do you balance all of this together and do it without creating any tension between the 2 of you, and also making time for the 2 of you? Because your mental well-being and the health is very much associated with how supported and how connected you feel to your partner. So just curious how you guys manage all that amongst all this stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I'm very lucky. I'm super lucky to have Joe in my life, and to have gotten to build a business with her has been amazing. And, we've been together forever. We met when Joe was 15 and I was 17. So we've had a lot of amazing journey together of kind of building ourselves up, and people change over time. And I think we've been very lucky that we've changed together. We've had the same interests and the same things we've wanted to do. Whereas I see from my friends and peer groups that that's not always the case. You could be a perfect match for a while, but maybe one person has ambitions to do something and the other has different ambitions, and you can kind of grow apart. But we kind of did it gradually, which maybe would work for some people. Like if someone's listening is like, hey, I'd love to work with my spouse. We started in the floorball days already. So she worked at the National Hockey League and grew from a admin to the highest ranking female in hockey operations ever, running the whole officiating department with no experience in hockey at all. So she had the corporate kind of management, running teams, really, really well down. And I had the vision, I had the strategy, that side of it. And when it came to running this floorball tournament, we had $0 to do it. Nobody wanted to sponsor it. 1,000 players from across North America and Europe coming in. I would get so sick the week before the tournament because there was so much pressure that I couldn't deal with it. It was just such a big event that we're putting on with no help or support. We did everything. And I think that's where maybe it was year 2. I'm like, Joe, I need your help. You're really good at this stuff. Can you jump in and help me manage the volunteer team? Help me manage this. And then suddenly we realized wow, it works really well. The things that I could contribute, help move the needle. And then she would do things. Her skill set was very complementary to mine. It was the things that I sucked at, she was really good at. And I'm like, why don't we think about taking it to the next step? And her dad was very entrepreneurial. And I think Joe's talked about this before, where she's like, that made her not want to be an entrepreneur, because the worst thing was she could tell if her parents were arguing, it was when they couldn't afford to pay the bills and business was bad. When things were great, it's like, oh, business is good. A new car's in the driveway. Everything's awesome, and it was just this up and down. And she's like, I don't want that. And I think, over time, managed to convince her to be like, let's do this. And I think the transition to Miami to start Wyncode was one where it's like, we knew it was going to work between the two of us. We didn't know that the business would work. And at that time, we didn't have kids. So it was a lot of focusing on just the business, which we were both ready for at the time. I think balancing it with kids is, to me, is organization. And that means organizing time for us too. So we try to have regular date nights. We do something that a lot of our friends have incorporated, which is like on Sundays, it's like a 1 hour block where we plan the week. So we both have our calendars open, who's dropping off the kids, who's picking them up. Matthias has an allergist this morning. Joe's got that. It's my turn the next time. You know, just trying to be very, very split in the duties and helping each other when something's busy. I think without that planning thing, we'd be lost for the week. Like, it would be crazy. So that's really helped us. And then I think also for me, I strive to just be as involved with the kids as I can. I get a lot of joy and energy out of it. So I think it's like trying to be very balanced. And if someone's got a busy work week, then the other person's taking on more responsibility on the kid front. So I do really miss working with Joe. And hopefully one day we could work together again. That would be really, really great. But I realize it doesn't work for everybody, but it's been a gradual learning process for us.
Well, you guys work together in other ways, right? There's always something you're collabing on.
Yeah, well, we're building a house right now. That's another
right.
startup that's over budget and taking too long. So
Especially here in Miami
exactly.
now.
We're learning. We wanted it on ourselves, right?
It sounds like that forum model helped you guys with your Sunday planning.
Totally.
Well,
Yeah.
Joe's also in a forum, right? So she's a believer in the whole.
Yeah, she's actually on the EO board. It took a while. I think she held out for like 4 years while I was doing it, but then eventually kind of got convinced to try it. And she's got an amazing forum group 3.0. So I think she's gotten a lot of value out of it.
That's awesome. So as we wrap up here, like, let's hone it back into Usko, because that's really a lot of forward momentum there. You guys just raised some funding, and there's a lot of cool product initiatives. I saw you guys did some cool stuff at Miami NFT Week, right, with a really cool display and activation. So yeah, just kind of tell us more about kind of what's next for Usko and what
where
we
you're
can
going to
expect.
be, because I think you're going to be at Emerge.
Yeah,
Right.
definitely.
Yeah.
Part of the startup showcase. So if anyone's going to be at Emerge, would be amazing to meet them there. And really, like, we're super early in our journey. So we're just looking to build the community, get people who care about data ownership and the bigger vision to help us figure out what a roadmap is. What do people want in this space in terms of getting back control of your personal data? And we started with Amazon data, like I mentioned. So if you're an Amazon shopper, you just go to usko.app, install the app, and you'll get analytics on how much you spend.
You might not like what you see.
Yeah, you might not like it. Like, we'll start with fear. Like,
I
you
know.
spend too much on Amazon.
Yeah.
Let us tell you how much.
Right.
And, we might have a whale around the table or two whales around the table here.
Listen, I have a family of 5,
Yeah.
and we do need to curb our Amazon habits. that's
Yeah,
for
you
sure.
did pretty well on the leaderboard, so it's all good. But basically, the whole idea is knowledge is power.
Yes.
Let you see what it is, and then we give you information on, like, for example, inflation. Like, if you buy products regularly, how much have they gone up in price? And then there's a messaging feature where these brands can send you messages. Every time you read it, you earn credits, which will eventually be potentially a token or a way to get gift cards or value back. So that's what we're building currently. And the cool activation we did was we kind of took a page from the playbook of this art group called Mischief that did at Art Basel. Everybody pretty much went viral globally as this ATM where you would put in your bank card
sure.
Oh,
and you
yeah.
would see how you ranked, right?
Yeah.
And I think Diplo was like number 1 with 4 million. And
Yeah.
then some dude's like, sell all my stocks. I don't care if it's like 500 grand in tax. I need to win on this checking leaderboard. The guy comes in with 8 million on there. And I'm like, oh, great. Okay. So what we did that, but with Amazon spending. So we're trying also to do that virtually. So you can join our Discord, share what your spending was. We'll add you to a leaderboard. Who cares if you're first or not?
Yeah.
It's just fun to see where you rank.
For sure.
It's really viral. And we just want that as a way to get awareness of how much we all spend on this platform. And Amazon does not want you thinking about that. They just want you to one click and buy as much as possible. So a lot of angles here: own your data, but also spend your money wisely.
Incredible. Love that. I was in that space 5 minutes or 10 minutes before he had passed by and put in his card.
Nice.
I'm like,
Okay.
thank God we didn't do it.
Yeah. The coolest was the person who had like 3 cents. I was like, how do you?
There was zero. There was like zero on the
zero.
bank account.
And like the
couple.
last 20 was the ticket to get in there, and then
That's
I'm
funny.
like, that's like living on the edge.
I
like
love how
that.
you've leveraged that idea into this, because that's a really fun. I think you need to gamify things for people
Yes.
that sound complicated, or that when they see something bad about it, it's like, let's just laugh. Like, this guy got
Yes.
0, and we're all like, you know,
Yeah. It's funny. And I think, ultimately there's so much we can do with that data. And right now AI is the buzzword that everyone's talking about. And if you think about this, like the data that's out there about us on the internet, like what Facebook owns your social graph, Amazon owns your purchases, Google has your search history, Apple knows your location. None of these companies know all of those things. And if you as a user put that data together, the things you could learn from that, like running AI or whatever, is incredible. It could change your life. So we want to really be a platform where eventually long term you can do that, put it all together and really like own that data and do what you want with it. Part of which could be monetizing it, right? And
Absolutely.
that data set's better than any of these companies will have. So that's a long-term vision that we'd like to get to.
That sounds epic. Where can folks go to download the app and check it out?
So best is just usko.app, which is usko.app, and you can just download it. We're on iOS and Android, and Discord's the best way to hit us up. Just join the community and let us know what you think.
Well, it's been a pleasure having you here, Juha. Thank you so much for coming in and being our first guest of what is
Such
it,
an
season
honor.
2.
The pod is
comeback.
back. The pod is back.
Awesome.
All right, this is it. We'll see you guys next time.
Thank you.
Thanks, man.
All right. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Lessons via Leaders. We hope you enjoyed today's show and gained some valuable insight from our guest. If you enjoyed it, please leave us a review and subscribe to stay up to date on our latest episodes. That goes a long way. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Lessons via Leaders for behind the scenes looks and exclusive content. Until next time, keep leading with purpose and creating positive change in the world. We hope you have an incredible, incredible day. And thank you again.